so that we can move on with the next one. We'll be starting up with Kailasha Temple at Ellora. The excavated shrine beside these Ellora, the latest of them being Jaina caves belonging to 9th and 10th. The Indira Sabha is the best example, but most remarkable of the excavation at Ellora, and by far the most stupendous example of rock cut architecture is the Temple of Kailasha, a creation which thousands of skilled stone cutters must have obviously reveled. The Kailasha is the achievement of an audacious visionary who saw in the art culmination of religious devotions and an effective challenge to transience. Time and labor apparently did not count as obstacle to the massive undertaking. We see in this temple a departure from the old traditions of excavated subterranean halls to a new, bold experiment in which a large scale replica of the structural temple is scooped out of the solid hill. Referring to the physical magnitude of this unique achievement, Percy Brown says that the plan of the Kailash Nath approximate in areas that of the Parthian and Athenian, and its height is 1.5 times that of the Greek masterpiece. The Kailasha is more than the twice the size of Virupaksha temple at Pat- Pattadakal and bears a certain resemblance to it. Its architecture, although distinctly more evolved and far more imaginative in conception. If the conception of excavated temple of this magnitude was bold, it must have required an even bolder patron to have undertaken the work. The Rashtrakuta king, the Krishna first, 757 to 783, had the confidence in the resources to take it up. The Kailasha temple is primarily the work of stone cutters. They started on it after digging three enormous trenches from above the hill to obtain a massive isolated block of rock 60 meters long, 30 meters wide, standing in a courtyard 91 meters long and 53 metric wide. Having thus obtained the rocky mass into which the temple was to be carved, the artisan started working after the top and front. As the architects delineated the architectural plan, the sculptors started carving out their ornate design. The temple consists of four parts: the main shrine, the entrance gate to the west, the intermediate shrine for Nandi, the mount of Shiva, and the cloisters surrounding the courtyard. The temple stands a lofty plinth 7.6 meters high, which is heavily molded both at the top and bottom. In between the two runs an imposing frieze of elephant and lions of considerable size, giving the illusion of supporting the entire superstructure on their back. Flight of steps lead to the pillared porch, which is also stands on the plinth. The temple is a harmonious combination of all known elements of temple architecture and pilasters, niches, cornices, vimana. The tower is a replica of a three-tiered structure with its predominantly projecting gable front and surmounted by a shapely cupola reaching up to a total height of 95 feet, nearly 29 meters. The tower recalls a mind the Shikara of the Mamlapuram Ratha. Its Pallava contemporary around the base of Shikara are grouped five miniature shrines, each being modeled of the main shrine. Look at this one, the plan of Kailasha temple at Ellora from History of Indian Eastern Architecture by Ferguson. Right. The interior of the temple consists of a cella, vestibule, and pillared hall. The hall, which is 21.3 meters by 18.9 meters, has 16 square pillars arranged in groups of four at four corners so as to leave a passage all around. In front of the mandapa, a pillared hall, is a beautiful Nandi shrine, 6 meters square. It stands on high plinth, which is connected with the main temple by a bridge. The main entrance of Kailasha temple is double-storied structure of ample proportion. Adjacent to the Nandi shrine on each side are the two Dwaja stambhas, banner columns, which are detached pillars 515.5 meters high. Each one of them is a delightfully proportioned and exquisitely finished all round the courtyard. a cloistered composed of colonnaded pillars which provide a rich background to the central mass, which is the temple. If the Kailasha temple is considered unique for its rock cut architecture, it holds the ground equally proudly for its magnificent sculpted panels. Some of them are as great and timeless as the famous sculptures of Elephanta. The Durga panel showing the slaying of a buffalo demon by the goddess is a powerful portraiture of the mythological theme and brings out effectively the tensions and heroism of the contending forces. A still more remarkable example of craftsmanship panel devoted to another mythical theme in which the demon king Ravana seeks to convulse Kailasha, the mountain board of the Shiva. It depicts the haughty ten-headed king in the act of shaking Kailasha from its suburban depths. At a moment when Shiva and Parvati have retired into privacy of their chamber, we see consternation in the gestures of Parvati's Shiva's wife, who, frightened by the underground convulsions, clings to her mate for protection. Shiva, serene and composed, presses down the hill with his left foot and imprisons the impudent demon. The entire drama is depicted on a two-storied stage and placed in a deeply cut niche. The figures are realistically proportioned and convey the illusion of life with very little of the symbolic and ornamented character which is so common to the sculptural masterpiece of the later centuries. On the exterior of the central court, however, we find a rather interesting panel of intricate relief sculptures running horizontal bands depicting the epic story of Ramayana. It is interesting because the treatment, the inspiration, and the technique adopted in the Kailasha temple in subsequent centuries a conspicuous feature of Hoysala or later Chalukyan temples. It is difficult indeed to estimate the influence of the Kailasha architecture on the later temples of the Kannada country. Its general characteristics are more Dravidian or Pallava than Chalukya. It might be more reasonable to treat it as a unique example, great in itself, rather than as link in a long chain of evolution. Death of Hiranyakashipu, Dasavrata cave, Ellora, 7th century. Ravana ki Khai, cave number 14th. Interior view, it consists mainly of a pillared hall and a shrine. The sculptures in the pillared recess of walls are virile and bold. Rameshwara cave, Ellora, exterior view, simple and plain. This excavated hall is known for rich in carvings in its wall. The Dhumar Lena or Sita Nahani, Ellora, Kailasha temple, Ellora, 8th century. The Ravana under Mount Kailasha panel from Kailasha temple. The later Chalukyan style. While passing from the early Chalukyan temples AD 500 to 750 to this later Chalukyan or Hoysala 1000 to 1300, the Rashtrakuta period comes to an interregnum with its emphasis on the rock cut techniques. This does not, however, imply that the structural type of the construction was given up for a time. The Kailasha temple at Ellora were itself only a reproduction of the prevailing structural types, though far more refined and embellished than the model. By the time the activities of the rock cutting architecture culminated in the exquisite achievement in Ellora, Western Deccan also witnessed great political changes which brought about the eclipse of Rashtrakuta power and revived the ancient Chalukya dynasty under Tela II. From AD 973 onwards, the Kannada country passed into the hands of the new Chalukyan dynasty, who set up their capital at Kalyani, 96 kilometers from the modern Bidar. The two major powers came to dominate South India during the succeeding 2 centuries, went to the Cholas in the east and Chalukyas and Hoysalas in the west. About the time when the Chalukyas were still busy consolidating their newly acquired gains, there was a spurt of artistic activity in the Mysore region under the patronage of an ancient but relatively minor dynasty of rulers called Gangas, whose capital was Talakad, Mysore district. Professing allegiance to one or the other of the powerful dynasties, whether they were Cholas, the Rashtrakutas, or Chalukyas, they had contrived to preserve their political identity. Jainas by faith, the Gangas made great contribution to the literature and the art of the ancient Mysore. The greatest bequest of the Gangas to the art and architecture of South India is the group of monument at Shravana Belogao, northeast of the Mysore city. Of these, the Chamundaya Basadi, the stupendous monolithic statue of Gomata, son of the first Tirthankara, are the best examples. The Basandi is situated on the Chandragiri, one of the two hills adjoining the temple town, commenced sometime around 980 AD and completed sometime early in the 10th century. The Jaina temple conforms to the typical Chola architecture. The temple is small structure being 21.3 meters to length, including the portico on the eastern front, and 11 meters wide. It has a pyramidal shikara crowned by a domical fine finale. Opposite this hill is Indra Betta or Indra's Hill, about 120 meters. On the summit of this hill, surrounded by an arcade of cloisters, stands the stone coloss of Gomata, over 17 meters in its height. This magnificent statue of the nude Jaina saint was carved from a solid block of Genesis which had crowned the hill. The statue is elegantly positioned and serene. Benevolent smile of Jaina saint is still fresh today as when the artist left it carved. Towards the middle of the 10th century, a new artistic impulse bloomed in Kannada country, which cannot strictly be described as continuation of the Rashtrakuta tradition as we see it exemplified in the famous caves of Western Deccan. The multi-pillared, flat-roofed cave temples with their profusion of sculpted panels must have, however, influenced the Hoysalan style. Nor did this impulse result in hasty limitations of any style, old or existing. The large number of temples built between AD 1050 to 1300 is rather a limited region of Mysore speak of unprecedented era of artistic activity, which, while being undoubtedly inspired by earlier traditions, produced an architecture sufficiently distinctive to merit a separate appellation. The term Chalukyan, which modern writers have applied to the large number of Hoysala temples, refers to the region under the occupation of the dynasty rather than the dynasty itself. The Hoysalan, under whose patronage most of these temples were constructed, began as subordinates. Chief under Chalukyas or Kalayanth, and rapidly rose to political eminence towards the beginning of the 12th century. Finally, they overthrew their imperial suzerains and began the most dominant power in South India, influencing its political dynasty from about 1150 to 1310 AD. In the most important respect, the later Chalukyan style was a continuation of the early Chalukyan tradition as represented by the group of temples at Ehol, Badami, Pattadakal. They supplied the model from which Hoysala architects derived their ideas, which in subsequent centuries were amplified and elaborated upon. The marked departure from the simpler and older styles of 7th century to the more elaborate and ornate styles of the second millennium was made possible by the discovery of a new building material by a much finer grain than sandstone. This material was soapstone called choloritic schist by geologists, which is found in abundance in Mysore state. It is close textured and highly traceable under the chisel. The builders could lavish their unrivaled skill and decorative art effortlessly on this excellent dark greenish soft stone. The basic scheme of typical Hoysala temple is not very different from the known types in South India. The Pallava Vimana influenced the Chalukyan style, but it was not subjected to radical modification. The horizontal arrangement of the tiers was retained, but total height was reduced by making each tier shorter. We'll take a quick break.